Formula One on 5 Live.
Hello and welcome to the show. It's round 11 of the Formula One World Championship and we've come to Austria. It's a beautiful circuit. It's nestled in the heart of the Styrian Mountains. It's green, it's lush, and I tell you what, we've finally got a fight on our hands and I am so excited. Ben Edwards, lead commentator, has joined us along with Mark Priestley, former F1 mechanic, and Andrew Benson will be along shortly. He's our F1 correspondent. And Ben, let's start with you. F1 is finally competitive again. It's been a while.
Absolutely, of course. And Max Verstappen has dominated things over the last couple of years and appeared to be dominating at the start of this season, but that has not continued in quite the same way. His battles, particularly with Lando Norris, have been very, very interesting. Yeah,
it's great to see McLaren back up there and charging. And Mark, the team you used to work for, you must feel part of the credit goes down to you, surely.
I mean, yeah, let's go with that. Yeah. No, I'm really pleased because I know a lot of those people and I also know what tough times they've been through over the last, quite a long period of time. We're talking, 10 years or more, aren't they, where they've really struggled. So it's really lovely to see all the hard work that's gone on in the background now starting to return results for them.
So today, Friday of a Grand Prix and a sprint Grand Prix. So Ben, just remind us of what happened today.
Well, actually, it's perfect because Verstappen and Norris have ended up on the front row together for the sprint race. So they're going to be fighting each other off the line. Piastri for McLaren, he was third fastest. The Mercedes were pretty rapid, but it didn't quite work out for them in qualifying. George Russell was fourth, Lewis Hamilton was fifth. And the same for Ferrari. They've gone well in Austria in the past, but Carlos Sainz was fifth and Charles Leclerc had a problem coming out of the pits on the final run and he's ended up down in 10th place. It was a better day for Alpine. They've struggled to get into the top 10 in qualifying and sprint races until now, but they got both cars up there. And further down the order, I think the main sort of surprise really was that the two Aston Martins failed to get into the top 10. Stroll was a fraction faster than Alonso, but they both failed to make it out of Q2. So really the interest up front, of course, with Verstappen and Norris fighting against each other from the start.
Andrew Benson has managed to join us. Andrew, did you enjoy qualifying today?
I did, Jenny, yeah. Why wouldn't I?
Exactly. I mean, 0.093 seconds split Verstappen from Norris. As you say, they'll be on the front row. And I think, Andrew, there's a lot of excitement building, isn't there, for F1 at the moment and for this revived McLaren?
Well, it's been very close, Jenny, hasn't it, over the last 5 races? Verstappen's won 3 of the last 5. It could have been Norris easily with that statistic. As it is, it's only 1 for Norris. The tiniest of margins have separated him and Verstappen in both Canada and Spain. And again today in qualifying in Austria. Actually, because this is such a short track, this is probably a slightly bigger margin between the two of them. And Norris didn't look as convincing through qualifying as some people thought he might do, especially given McLaren have a big upgrade on the car this weekend with a new front wing, but it's only sprint qualifying. There's obviously a sprint race tomorrow morning and then the teams can change their cars again before Grand Prix qualifying later on Saturday. So it does look on the face of it so far as if it's going to be another really close battle between those two.
I'm amazed at how rapidly this has changed. We came into this season and I mean, this podcast, this programme can often be a bit of a doom fest. We're saying, Verstappen's going to do this, this is problematic. But actually, we're at a point now where it's not always going to be Verstappen. And at least the threat or the potential going into a race weekend is really quite exciting.
Absolutely right. And, as we've seen, Norris has had good chances to take victories. He's got to get off the line well as well. So we've got to see him get off the line at the start of a race when he's starting on the front row of the grid. Didn't quite work for him in Spain and he knocked himself a little bit for that, but he's got fantastic pace and the McLaren car, as you were saying, Mark, it's really come along incredibly well, hasn't it?
Yeah, we're into a proper development war at this stage of the season because we've now got some closeness at the front. We're at the latter stages of the cycle of regulations that's been stable for quite some time. So the margins become smaller and smaller of potential opportunity to do better. Of course, McLaren have taken giant leaps because they started from a long way further back than the likes of Red Bull, but this championship, and maybe even next year's as well, is going to come down to who's able to out-develop the other. Red Bull haven't really been in that position in the past because they've had such a dominant car. They haven't really needed to develop all the way through a season. Last year they gave up development very early and were able to focus on this year's car. So I guess that's a new dynamic for Red Bull. So how are they going to be able to react to the likes of McLaren and maybe Ferrari and now maybe even Mercedes joining the party at the front, really pushing them?
Oh, I'm loving this party feeling. Right, so let's hear from Lando Norris. He's been talking about how he feels after the last 3 races. Does he feel buoyed by it all or just a bit frustrated?
It depends how you think. You can think of it both ways, to be honest with you. I think there's been a great amount of points. I think as a team, we performed extremely well. But when you're a competitor and you're here to win and only here to win, and when you know what was possible and what wasn't, then I'm always going to think of what the highest possibility was, and that was to potentially win races. But that's potentially, and I think we're at a level now where everything has to be perfect. We're against one of the best drivers ever in Formula One, who's performing at an incredibly high level. And anything that was not perfect, like my start last weekend, you pay the price for, and simple as that. So I think, maybe one potential win lost, which was last weekend. But sometimes that happens, like there's been plenty of races that people have lost because even if they've been in a quicker car or not, because of a small mistake. And one tiny thing and the rest of the race being perfect didn't get me back the race win, So it depends how you think, it depends what your mentality is. For me, I lost out on the race win. But you do have to think of the positives of it too, and how many things were good, how many things were at the level we need them to be at, and that was 99% of things. So I'm still happy on the whole. I'm gutted because I'm here to race, I'm here to win. That's what I want. That's what we all want in McLaren. So when you just miss out on that and you don't achieve it, then it hurts, and you'll be a bit frustrated by it. But on the whole, we did better than 18 other cars on the grid, and you kind of have to be a little bit happy with that. So 3 very good weekends, but we want more and we'll aim for higher.
You talk about the mentality that extends beyond you. It's not just Max in that car. He's driving for a team which is, as you say, perfect with the strategy, perfect with the pit stops, every element. That's a winning machine that has been motoring for years now. I know McLaren was saying earlier in the year it's going to take us a year to get to where we want. Andreas saying we have to take it race by race. How does that mindset change from hoping for a podium to now coming into the weekend expecting to fight for a win?
I think it's thinking about these little things. It's sometimes there's things that you probably didn't need to think of 5 years ago, 2 years ago, 1 year ago even, because that was just at the bottom of the list. But now that tiny thing that wasn't even on the list is now top of the list, So, you just have to kind of restructure things and rework things and think of those smaller differences. And I know that's what people say a lot is the marginal gain stuff, but my start last weekend was not a bad start. It was just not quite as good as what it needed to be. And maybe you can interpret that and say that's bad, therefore. But it wasn't like I made a big mistake, It was just another start that was there or thereabouts. But because it's a 600-meter run to turn 1, it cost me more than it does in. I think it's the second highest run to turn 1, so it cost me than 95% of other circuits that we go to this year. So you can easily think of it like that, and there's things I want to work on and the team needs to work on to do better. Like when I'm not at the level I want to be at, but I'm at a good level and the team's at a very strong level. But we're competing, like I said at the beginning, against a driver who's now won multiple championships, a team who's won multiple championships. They know of all these little things and they've been able to be on top of them for a lot longer period than what we have done. But we need to play catch up, and we need to play catch up fast, and we're doing that. The team are doing an amazing job, and I'm pushing and I'm doing the best I can on top of it. So we're going to make mistakes. We're not going to be able to do everything perfectly, but we're doing the best we can in order to do so.
That's a very mature sounding Lando Norris speaking to Will Buxton. I feel like he and McLaren have changed a lot over the course of the last couple of years. Mark, do you feel that when he speaks?
Yeah, absolutely. And what's really nice about hearing from Lando there is that he's got the mentality that he wants to go for this championship. I think he feels he's in the fight for this championship. There is a considerable gap still to Max Verstappen, and we're not saying Max Verstappen is suddenly falling away and losing his competitive pace. He's not. He's a formidable competitor. But Lando's seeing himself in that league, which is amazing. And I think the thing that really highlighted for me at the last last round in Spain was we heard a radio call between the team and Lando during the Grand Prix where the team sort of offered him a choice of strategy, one of which was to sort of cover off George Russell, who was chasing him down. George was in third, Lando's in second. Did he want to mirror the pit stop strategy that George is on to cover off the potential threat of an undercut? And Lando's response was fascinating to me because he came on the radio saying, look, well, we could do that, but only if we really want to protect second. What about if we want to go for first? What about rolling the dice and trying something which might bring us the big prize? And that's the mentality that Lando's got now. He's not just looking to get on the podium and get some great results. He's looking to actually win this. And that is, that's exactly what you need. The team need to have the same mentality, and they will. They'll grow towards that. They kind of need to learn how to win. They need to get that confidence back. That means you make the split-second decisions that are the ones that might be a tiny risk to them, but they're also the ones that, when they pay off, bring those big prizes.
Yeah, I agree with you. And the fact that he's now moved up into second in the championship, okay, it's not a big gap to Charles Leclerc, but he is second. He is the one chasing. And the gap is big at the moment. There's no doubt about it. 69 points is a big gap to the leader, Max Verstappen. But we've still got a long way to go in this season. As we've said, we're not quite halfway through the year. And any problems that come along, it was funny, we were watching practice earlier today and Max's car just stopped out on track, had to be pushed back into the pits. In fact, they sorted it out very quickly. But, a couple of events like that and everything could change. So it is fascinating to watch this rivalry.
Andrew, do you think we're getting carried away a bit too much now? Or is this genuine? Is this something that everyone can be excited about? Even you?
Well, Jenny, look, I mean, the season's been split into, there's been 10 races and it's been split into two very distinct halves. The first half, okay, Ferrari won a race in Australia, but basically Verstappen dominated completely. No one could get close to him. Since Miami, it's changed. McLaren are pretty close to Red Bull's pace, if not on it. In fact, there's debate in the paddock as to whether the Red Bull is even the fastest car anymore. Is it Verstappen who's actually making the difference? Toto Wolff, the Mercedes team principal, said that outright in Spain last weekend, that it was Verstappen making the difference. We've got two cars that are regularly separated by hundredths, sometimes less. And we've got races being decided by tiny margins. In Miami, Norris won, partly because Verstappen was held up because of a safety car deployment. Norris was quicker, but whether he would have beaten Verstappen if he hadn't got the lead because of that, we don't know. In Canada, again, if McLaren had pitted initially when the first safety car was deployed rather than waiting a lap, Norris could have kept the lead. He could have won the race as a result. Same in Spain. If he'd made a better start and not been beaten by Verstappen into the first corner, he probably would have won that race. So, of course, anyone who's interested in close competition and interested in Formula One, and those two things are not a given, obviously, for the audience, but if those two things apply, then, of course, you should be excited because there's no reason to believe that for the next 14 races, and that's a very, very long way to go still, not even half the season has gone, and we're just about to turn into July, it could be really close between the two of them all year. And we've got Mercedes getting better and better and Ferrari having a bit of a wobble, but they're also confident they can stay in the fight. So 4 teams at the front, close on every race. This is proper close competition that Formula One's not had for 2 years.
Yeah, it is so close that I think it's going to swing from circuit to circuit. The margins are so fine, like you say, that some circuits are going to suit a Red Bull. We already know there are inherent weaknesses in that Red Bull, so it's not bulletproof everywhere. They'll go to a circuit. We know Singapore's going to be a potential weak point unless they can overcome their troubles, and there'll be others that will really suit the McLaren. So that's what's going to be really interesting to watch. The one thing I think that Lando Norris is sort of smelling blood here is that we've already seen that Max Verstappen is kind of on the brink of potential engine penalties. He's already taken all 4 of his allowable internal combustion engines for the entire season, which means that there's a very high chance that at some point he'll end up taking a penalty. Well, that could be 25 points potentially that disappear, and potentially that could go to Lando Norris. And in that situation, that championship gap closes up pretty quickly.
And speaking about Max Verstappen, he has confirmed that he will be staying at Red Bull for next season. That doesn't come as a huge surprise. He's contracted there until the end of 2028, but there are rumours about what he might do after 2025. This is his team boss, Christian Horner, speaking a little earlier.
It only reaffirms everything that we already know. Max is an important part of our team. He's had all of his victories and podiums in Red Bull racing cars, his 3 world championships so far. And, he's a crucial member of the team. He enjoys being part of the team, got a tremendous group around him. And, we know what the future looks like. And, obviously a lot of noise has been made about him going elsewhere, and sometimes one just thinks that that's a distraction tactic that's just thrown in, because you have to question, what are the motives, obviously behind that, and the driver that's created all the movement in the market had all the information about the engines and 2026 regulations and so on, and chose to leave and left a vacancy at Mercedes, which is why there has now been obviously a little bit of speculation as to who will fill that seat, but it won't be Max Verstappen. If he does want a Verstappen for next year, then I guess Jos is potentially available.
Oh my goodness, Andrew Benson. I don't know what to ask you. Just speak about that, please.
Okay, so this situation is a lot more murky than Christian Horner was suggesting in that interview, which was taken from the press conference that took place earlier today. And it's not completely clear yet that Verstappen will stay at Red Bull at the end of this year. It looks like he probably will. The conversation that Horner was alluding to was people in the media conference yesterday trying to get Verstappen to confirm absolutely that he would stay at Red Bull in 2025. And initially he didn't do that. He talked about, he was already thinking about 2025 with the team. They're working hard on it to improve and so on. Eventually someone said, will you just say yes or no? And his response was, okay, yes. So he was trying not to say yes or no, but kind of got forced into it. So that's the first thing. Now the backdrop to this is what many people perceive to have been a bit of a childish spat between Horner and Jos Verstappen, Max's father, which is why Christian Horner mentioned Jos Verstappen. There's a parade of legends cars, or legends in old cars, I should say, here at the Red Bull Ring this weekend. And Jos Verstappen was supposed to be driving a 2012 Red Bull in that parade. He said to a Dutch newspaper this weekend he wasn't going to do that because Horner had tried to block him. Now, what appears to have happened is that Horner found out that Jos Verstappen was driving this car. If you remember, there's been a dispute between Verstappen and Jos Verstappen and Christian Horner going back to the allegations of sexual harassment and coercive and controlling behaviour that were made against Horner by a female employee of Red Bull earlier this year. Horner denies those allegations. Verstappen said at the time that the team would be torn apart if Horner didn't leave his position as team principal. Red Bull so far have backed Horner. The complainant has appealed against that decision. Her appeal was rejected. She's appealed again, and that process is ongoing. So when Verstappen came out, Jos Verstappen that is, and made these remarks about Horner blocking him from this parade, obviously it's caused a bit of a storm. Now, Horner says he didn't try and block Verstappen. What I've been told by sources close to the situation is that Horner tried to suggest that Verstappen shouldn't drive the car because of the history between them this year. It was going to go ahead with Verstappen in the car. Then it was decided that Verstappen wouldn't be filmed by Red Bull's channels or shown on any of Red Bull's channels. And when Verstappen heard that, he decided, this isn't worth it, I'm not going to drive. So that's what's going on there. Meanwhile, this is all mixed up with 25 and 26. There's quite a strong possibility, I'm told, although Max Verstappen's not decided, that he could well leave Red Bull at the end of 2025 and go to Mercedes. There's still a small possibility, only small, that he could leave at the end of this year. And although he has a contract at the end of 2028, there are mechanisms by which Max Verstappen can leave Red Bull whenever he chooses. So this is not a resolved situation by any stretch of the imagination.
Sounds like a right happy family, doesn't it?
It really does. And it's also the connection it's a bit sad to hear in a way. You know, we know that the Jos Verstappen relationship with Christian has not been at its best, as you mentioned earlier on, Andrew. And in a way, I'm a bit surprised that they haven't just tried to smooth things out a little bit. But from what you're saying is going on at this weekend, it's just stirring it up again, because Max might get upset by all of that, you know?
And just think about the consequences of Max Verstappen leaving, whether it's next year, which, as you suggest, might be unlikely, but even if it is in 26, which seems far more likely, the consequences of that to Red Bull are enormous, because Max is by far their biggest asset and has been throughout most of their time. They've now even lost the likes of Adrian Newey. They've got Sergio Perez in the other car, which I think everybody agrees is nowhere near at the same level. So the one thing that's keeping Red Bull winning, if he decides to go somewhere else, what have they got left?
Yeah, so look, Max Verstappen's behind the scenes, I'm told he's not happy about all of this. He doesn't want to be racing with this backdrop happening all the time. He wants to just go racing. And obviously, he doesn't want to get involved either. But if he's also, at the same time, very close to his father. Jos is here this weekend. He's part of his management team. We don't know yet whether it's going to come to this, but if it came to a dispute between Horner and Verstappen, Jos Verstappen that is, and Max had to choose one way or the other, I think most people would expect, given the closeness of his relationship with his father, that he would choose to go with his father. So nobody knows what's going to happen. All we know is that the internal situation at Red Bull is very unsettled. Let's not forget that Adrian Newey, the chief technical officer, the greatest Formula One designer in history, left Red Bull. And one of the main reasons why he's leaving Red Bull is because of this controversy over Horner and his treatment of this female employee. So I don't know how long it's going to take to resolve. It could be months. It could run into next year. But there's plenty of developments still to come in this story.
So on that, Andrew, what about the idea? Let's just speculate and say Max Verstappen decides to go next year. I know it may be a long shot, but let's say he decides to jump in that vacant seat of Mercedes. At Red Bull, we could speculate that one of the main reasons they've signed Sergio Perez is, at least in part, to keep Max Verstappen happy. It's part of a larger plan to keep their biggest asset on side and to try and help him to stay with the team and keep that stable relationship. They don't want to ruffle the feathers. So let's just say Max goes, they're left with Sergio Perez and almost no other talent on the market ready to fit into that seat.
If he went at the end of this year, then Red Bull have got a massive drama on their hands. And actually, someone was saying to me earlier today, can Carlos Sainz actually wait a bit longer before he makes his decision? At the moment, he's choosing between Sauber and Williams and Alpine for next season, it would appear. And that's because he's been rejected effectively by Mercedes and Red Bull, which were his two main choices after Ferrari decided to sign Hamilton to join Charles Leclerc next year. But if this carries on, you know, if, say, for example, McLaren continue to develop some developments that Red Bull have got coming over the next couple of races, I'm told, don't put them back in a more dominant position at the front. Might Max decide, actually, maybe I could go to Mercedes. Maybe I'm not going to lose that much if I go to Mercedes. You know, if we talked earlier about the way this season's been split into two halves so far. In that first half of the season, Mercedes were basically nowhere. Since Miami, they've been piling upgrades on the car, and they're not at the pace of Red Bull and McLaren yet, but they're definitely getting closer. And they've also got more developments coming. It's getting to the point where Verstappen, who obviously believes he's the best driver in the world, might think that he could win the championship in a Mercedes if they continue to make steps forward over the next few months. And then maybe he's not got so much to lose by leaving Red Bull. Whereas, you know, in February and March, when the Horner controversy first started, then there was obviously a lot to lose by leaving. So I don't think actually he's going to leave at the end of this year. I'm told that's not in his mind at the moment, but it's certainly a possibility at the end of next year.
I'm just fascinated in a sport that is so high tech, so many millions of pounds being deployed with and spent on it, that actually it's still fathers and sons and unions, and those relationships are so important. And we've seen it before with Lewis Hamilton and his father. We now see it with Jos and Max. And Ben, it's unlike any other sport I'm aware of, that a father or mother can have so much influence on their children, even though they're grown adults and earning millions of pounds.
Yeah, but I think in motor racing, of course, that influence has come from very early in their careers, and particularly both with Max and with Lewis. Their fathers were so involved in their karting careers and got them into racing and supported them and spent money on them and got them to levels that they were then able to take it on and go to the very, very highest level, both of them. So, their relationships are very, very important, very connected, and I think Max and Jos, their relationship is still very, very close, and it does make a difference. There's no doubt about it. So it is, as Andrew was saying, it's all part of a factor of how this might turn out in the future.
Just on that note, we've had 2 contracts being announced. No great surprise from either of them. Pierre Gasly has signed with Alpine again and extended his contract, and Lance Stroll has signed with his father's team. That's Lawrence Stroll and Aston Martin for the foreseeable future. So those are 2 vacancies that we can scrub off the list. But Mark, it's all about the racing. We need to get our eyes back on the track. Sprint race, Grand Prix. Stick your neck out, be bold. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I knew you were going to ask that at some point. By the way, just before I say that, I'm so intrigued as to how those contract negotiations go with Lance and Lawrence Stroll. I mean, what are the conversations like? I really want to dig into that, but maybe that's for another day. In terms of this weekend, where's it going to go? It's so close to call that it's a difficult one. We are literally plucking names out of thin air. You can't discount Max Verstappen. He's done it today in the sprint qualifying, but not by very much. I genuinely think George Russell is in with a proper shout here, and maybe even Lando Norris. So I'm literally dancing around the actual answer here. I'm going to go Max Verstappen.
Ben.
So we're talking about the Grand Prix win or the sprint win at the moment?
Let's go for both.
Thank you very much.
You've set it up.
Well, Max Verstappen has a tremendous background here in Austria and a massive amount of support. And I do think, just watching today, how the car, one of the things that we talked about earlier, the fact that they don't have to hit curbs on the inside of corners here, which is something the Red Bull can't do very well at some of the tracks. It doesn't happen here. And I do think the Red Bull's actually in very good shape. Whether it's going to have the race pace, of course, exactly the same race pace, because the McLaren has shown very good race pace recently. That's a difficult one to judge. So I do think that Max probably will take yet another win. I do tend to agree with that, but I'm not 100% sure about it. I can tell you that.
Andrew?
I don't know, Jenny. It's so close at the moment, isn't it? Hundredths again today. I'm going to say Verstappen for the sprint race, Norris for the Grand Prix.
I was going to say the same. This is unusual, but let's go with it.
Isn't it great that none of us can actually pick a winner? I mean, it's been so long since we've been able to do that. So I think it's wonderful.
And even George Russell and the Mercedes looked decent today, and you could feel that it was almost there for them. It's just... These are halcyon days for F1, isn't it? I'm loving it.
Yeah, me too.
Well, you should join us because we're loving it. So obviously you should love it as well. It won't be as boring as an England match. We can be assured of that. You can listen to the Austrian Grand Prix on 5 Live from 2 p.m. on Sunday. We're back tomorrow for the sprint race and qualifying, which you can listen to on the BBC Sport website and via your smart speaker. Just tell it what to do and it will do it. Next up on 5 Live, it's Tony Livesey. But before that, let's get the latest BBC News.